Hello hockey fans, and welcome back to another episode of Buyer's Remorse, the series where we look back at some of the biggest trades, signings, or other acquisitions in league history, but teams didn't quite get what they paid for. In today's episode, we are going to be taking a look at a front office hiring that seemed full of potential, but quickly turned into a bust, as we explore why the hiring of Peter Chiarelli gave the Edmonton Oilers plenty of buyer's remorse. Before we begin, I just want to mention that over 80% of you who watched my videos last month did not subscribe to my channel, so if you do enjoy this video and you want to see more like it in the future, consider hitting that subscribe button. It would really help me out a lot, folks. But anyways, on with the video. Let's start by taking a look at the signing itself. On April 24th, 2015, it was announced that the Edmonton Oilers, who had finished the prior 14-15 NHL season as the third worst team in the entire league, had hired Peter Chiarelli to serve as the team's new general manager. This signing was made after the Oilers had fired the team's previous general manager, Craig McTavish, and came at a time when the franchise was at an all-time low, having failed to make the playoffs every year since their miracle run to the Stanley Cup Finals in 2006, 9 years ago. In order to see why Chiarelli was hired over the other candidates available, let's take a look at his front office career before joining the Oilers and see why he was considered the right man for the job. Following a brief playing career with Harvard University and the UK's Nottingham Panthers, Peter Chiarelli began working in Ottawa as both a player agent and an attorney, before being hired by the Ottawa Senators in 1999 to join their front office staff. The Canadian law graduate would then spend the next 5 seasons as a director of the Senators, before being promoted to assistant general manager during the 04-05 lockout season. After 2 years in his new role, Chiarelli was then hired by the Boston Bruins on May 26, 2006 to serve as the general manager of the original 6 franchise. Chiarelli would then spend the next 9 years at the helm of the Bruins front office, where his wheeling and dealing helped to build a team that would win 4 division championships, 2 conference championships, make 2 appearances in the Stanley Cup Finals, and even win a Stanley Cup in 2011. However, after missing the playoffs during the 14-15 season by just 3 points, the Boston Bruins announced that they had relieved Chiarelli of his GM duties on April 15, 2019. 9 days later, he got the job with Edmonton. Considering the position Edmonton was in at the time, I can certainly understand why they hired a guy like Chiarelli to take the reins. The Oilers organisation had been poorly managed for so long, and their fans had been deprived of successful hockey for such a long time, that it seemed Edmonton was destined to sit at the bottom of the league standings year after year after year, no matter how many first overall draft picks they were able to get their hands on. By hiring a guy like Chiarelli, they were getting an experienced, capable general manager who had already shown that he could put together a successful roster that had gone all the way and won a Stanley Cup, something the Oilers had failed to come anywhere close to for the last decade. With a proven commodity like Chiarelli at the helm, the Oilers were hoping that he could work his GM magic, finally pull Edmonton out of the league's basement, and put them back on the hunt for their long-awaited 6th championship. Now that we know why he was hired, let's take a look at what happened after Chiarelli took the reins and see why the Oilers would regret this move for years to come. Given that he spent 4 years in charge of the team, it would take me quite a while to examine every single move he made, so I'm just going to focus on his biggest and his worst deals, which, believe me folks, there is more than enough to go around. Just a few months after he was hired during the 2015 off-season, Chiarelli immediately got stuck in and made his first few changes to the roster. Not only would he hit the jackpot by taking Connor McDavid in the 2015 draft and make his first big splash in free agency by signing defenseman Andrej Sekera to a 6-year, $33 million contract, but he also made his first few trades too, acquiring defenseman Griffin Reinhart from the New York Islanders in exchange for a 1st and 2nd round draft pick, as well as trading several other draft picks to the New York Rangers to pick up netminder Cam Talbot. Though Chiarelli picked up a generational talent with McDavid, and also added some other solid prospects in the 2015 draft, like Caleb Jones, Ethan Bear and John Marino, the rest of those early moves provided mixed results. Free agent signing Andrej Sekera played well during the first 2 years of his contract with back-to-back 30-plus point seasons, but then the injury bug bit, resulting in him playing just 60 games over his next 2 years, before having the final 2 years of his contract bought out. Not exactly Chiarelli's fault, but a pretty disappointing situation for all parties involved. And what about the trades? Well, Cam Talbot had a great start in Edmonton, earning the starting netminder role and posting 21, 42 and 31 win seasons respectively over his first 3 years, but a 10, 15 and 3 start during the 18-19 season would see him shipped off to the Philadelphia Flyers midway through the year. However, the Griffin Reinhart trade would turn out to be one of Chiarelli's worst moves as the Edmonton Oilers general manager. Reinhart would play in just 29 regular season games and a single playoff game with the Oilers, scoring a grand total of 2 points. So Chiarelli gave up a first and second round draft pick for a player who didn't even last a full NHL season on the team and scored just a pair of points. What makes this even worse is that the first round pick Edmonton gave up was used to select Matthew Barzal, a 2-time NHL All-Star and the 2018 Rookie of the Year. Yeah, that was a real bad trade in hindsight, wasn't it? Following his busy debut offseason, the Edmonton Oilers entered the 15-16 NHL season looking to make some notable strides forward and maybe even return to the playoffs for the first time since 2006. Despite adding a first overall draft pick, a top 4 defenseman and a new starting netminder, Chiarelli knew that he had to make some more changes to the roster during the season in order to put his team in the best position to succeed long term. A minor trade with Montreal on December 28th saw the Oilers acquire forward Zach Kassian in exchange for netminder Ben Scrivens, whilst a deal at the trade deadline saw the Oilers move defenseman Justin Schultz to Pittsburgh for a 2016 third-round draft pick. The Kassian trade would prove to be a great deal for Chiarelli, but the Schultz deal, not so much. Kassian immediately bolstered the Oilers roster with some added size and strength, and he also produced some decent scoring numbers too. The Canadian forward still remains on the Oilers roster almost 5 years later, and has just come off a career-high 15 goals and 34 points in just 59 regular season games, so it's safe to say that Chiarelli did a pretty good job on this one, especially when you consider that Ben Scrivens hasn't played in the NHL since the 15-16 season. However, the Justin Schultz trade is a lot less impressive, as since the deal, Schultz has emerged as a legitimate top 4 defenseman for the Penguins, posted a career-high 51-point season in 16-17, and has won a pair of Stanley Cups with Pittsburgh in 2016 and 2017. So once again, Chiarelli makes a good roster move, but counteracts it with a rather disappointing one. Unfortunately, Chiarelli's long list of transactions wouldn't amount to much success on the ice though, as the Oilers won just 31 games during the 15-16 season and finished 29th in the league standings. At least they got the 4th overall draft pick out of it. Oh yeah, they used it to select Jesse Puljujarvi, didn't they? The guy who scored just 37 points in 139 NHL games and has spent the last year in Finland demanding to be traded from the team. Whether he's now had a change of heart or not, so far he hasn't exactly been the ideal player from his draft class, has he folks? After a disappointing debut year in oil country, the 2016 offseason would be remembered as arguably the biggest and the worst of Peter Chiarelli's entire tenure in Edmonton. Shortly after the Jesse Puljujarvi pick, a blockbuster trade was announced on June 29th, in which the Edmonton Oilers announced that they had traded former first overall draft pick Taylor Hall to the New Jersey Devils in exchange for defenseman Adam Larsson. Whether this trade was a win or a loss for Chiarelli depends on who you ask, really. Larsson remains with Edmonton to this day and has become one of, if not the team's most reliable defensemen over the last 4 seasons, practically eating playing minutes for breakfast, whereas Taylor Hall moved on from the Devils earlier this season, but has put up 50 points or more in 3 of his last 4 years, including a 39-goal, 93-point year in 17-18, which earned him the Hart Memorial Trophy as the league's MVP. Having a 93-point scorer and league MVP on their roster probably would have helped them over the last few years, but if you ask me, Edmonton needed a right-handed puck-moving defenseman far more than another high-scoring forward, especially with the emergence of McDavid and fellow young gun Leon Draisaitl. Since both Hall and Larsson have gone on to have success in their respective roles and positions, I say both sides broke even on this one. Some other people might disagree, but that's my thoughts on it. And then came the big one. The worst move that Peter Chiarelli made as the Edmonton Oilers general manager. On July 1st, 2016, Chiarelli signed free agent forward, Stanley Cup champion and former Boston Bruin Milan Lucic to a 7-year, $42 million contract worth $6 million a season. Most of you already know how this one has ended, and I've already talked about it on a previous Buyer's Remorse, which you should go and watch after this one. It's a pretty good one if I do say so myself. But allow me to summarise this move for you for those that have forgotten or have simply repressed it from their memories completely. After signing this deal, Milan Lucic would start off well by posting a 50-point season in his first year in Alberta, but after that his numbers would fall off a cliff, scoring just 54 points in his next 161 games, before being traded to the Calgary Flames on July 19th, 2019, in exchange for another behemoth contract in the form of James Neal. Sure, Milan Lucic did post a 20-goal season with the Los Angeles Kings before the 2016 offseason, but Chiarelli should never have signed him to so much money or for so long either. I know he helped him win his cup with Boston in 2011, but Lucic wasn't the same player 5 years later, especially as the league got faster and he somehow got slower. The 16-17 season didn't really feature any huge moves by Chiarelli, other than the signing of shot-blocking, stay-at-home defenseman Chris Russell to a 4-year, $16 million contract, yet it turned out to be Chiarelli's most successful year with the Oilers. Edmonton were able to win 47 games and make their first appearance in the playoffs in 11 years, but they missed out on reaching the Western Conference Finals by a single game, as they were eliminated in Game 7 of the second round by the Anaheim Ducks. As a result, they were able to pick up Kayla Yamamoto with the 22nd overall pick in the draft, so there were certainly worse ways to cap off their best season in over a decade. The 2017 offseason wouldn't feature much in the form of a blockbuster trade or a massive free agent signing, but it would see fan favourite and career Oiler Jordan Eberle get shipped off to the New York Islanders in exchange for forward Ryan Strome. Because trading with the Islanders worked out so well for him the last time, didn't it, folks? If you're wondering whether this trade was a success for the Oilers, it wasn't. Ryan Strome would struggle mightily in Edmonton, scoring just 36 points in 100 games, before being traded to the New York Rangers just 18 months later in November of 2018 in exchange for forward Ryan Spooner. Whilst Jordan Eberle has stuck with the Islanders since the trade and has continued to put up numbers similar to his years in Edmonton, including a 25-goal, 59-point season in 17-18 and a 16-goal, 40-point season in 58 games during the shortened 19-20 season. If that wasn't bad enough, since the Oilers traded Ryan Strome to the Rangers, he's gone on to score 92 points in 133 games, whilst Ryan Spooner is now playing in Europe, having scored just 3 points in 25 games for the Oilers before being traded to the Vancouver Canucks. Not a franchise-altering trade, but still a pretty bad one. Going into the 17-18 NHL season, Chiarelli and the Oilers felt primed to take the next step. They were ready to distance themselves from their basement-dwelling past and show the rest of the league that they meant business as a legitimate cup contender. Unfortunately though, things wouldn't go too well for them, as they finished 23rd in the league standings and missed the playoffs once again. Having failed to clinch a postseason berth for consecutive seasons, the Oilers were awarded the 10th overall pick in the 2017 draft and used it to select defenseman Evan Bouchard, who looks like he'll be a pretty solid blue liner in the league for many years to come. Say what you want about his trades, his free agent signings, or the Jesse Puljujarvi pick, but for the most part, Peter Chiarelli made some pretty good selections at the draft. It helps when you're consistently picking in the top 10, of course, but still, he managed to build an impressive prospect pool for the Oilers. You can't fault him for that. The 2018 offseason saw Chiarelli focus his efforts more towards minor changes to the roster, which was highlighted by the signing of KHL goaltender and two-time Gagarin Cup champion Mikko Koskinen to a one-year contract worth $2.5 million, adding a reliable 1B option in the crease behind starting netminder Cam Talbot, until he was traded of course, and adding a proven winner from across the pond on a cheap prove-it deal. With his fourth season at the helm of the Oilers about to begin, and with just a single playoff appearance to his name so far, Chiarelli was starting to skate on thin ice. His team's performance during the upcoming 18-19 season would decide whether Chiarelli would continue to build a cup contender in Edmonton or whether he would be joining the unemployment line. Despite putting together what he thought was one of the better teams in the league, the hockey gods didn't agree. 50 games into the 18-19 season, Edmonton had posted a 23, 24 and 3 record, good enough for second worst in the Pacific Division. This lack of success didn't stop Chiarelli from securing the long-term services of some of his players though, as he signed goaltender Mikko Koskinen to a 3-year contract extension worth $4.5 million a year on January 1st, 2019, just 30 games into his NHL career. However, this move would turn out to be significant, but for all the wrong reasons. Less than 24 hours after handing Koskinen his extension, the Edmonton Oilers announced that they had relieved Peter Chiarelli from his general manager duties, replacing him with interim GM Keith Gretzky, followed by longtime Detroit general manager Ken Holland at the conclusion of the season. And thus ended the Peter Chiarelli era in Edmonton. So after all the trades and the free agent signings and the draft picks, what was the legacy that Peter Chiarelli left behind for the Edmonton Oilers? Well, in Chiarelli's 4 seasons with the Oilers organisation, Edmonton reached the playoffs just once, finishing 6th place or lower in their division 3 different times, as well as finishing 25th or lower in the league standings twice. Though he was able to stock up the Oilers' prospect pool with some high potential talent, in his pursuit of the playoffs, Chiarelli ended up trading away several players and assets, such as the draft pick that became Matthew Barzal, Justin Schultz, Taylor Hall and Jordan Eberle, who could well have helped him achieve these postseason expectations if he had kept them on the roster a little bit longer. Not only that, but Chiarelli also elicited the services of several key free agents like Andrej Sekera, Milan Lucic and Chris Russell, and signed them to large or even massive contracts in order to fill the gaps on his roster instead. Yet most of these deals ended up doing more harm to the team than good. If all of this doesn't scream buyer's remorse to you, I don't know what will. So, in conclusion, when the Edmonton Oilers hired Peter Chiarelli as their new general manager in April of 2015, they were hoping that the Stanley Cup champion could bring his talents and expertise to a franchise so void of success for many years and help the team return to its heyday of years gone by. What actually happened was his team missed the playoffs more often than not. He signed several players to ridiculous amounts of money, only to watch them never live up to their paycheck, and he made a number of trades that ended up favouring the other team both in the short term and for many years to come. If I was the Oilers, I would definitely be looking to get a refund. And that's why the hiring of Peter Chiarelli gave the Edmonton Oilers all the buyer's remorse. What do you guys think about Chiarelli's tenure in Edmonton? Also, is there another free agent signing, trade or front office hiring that you want me to look at as part of this series? Let me know in the comments below, I would love to hear what you guys think. But thank you very much for watching guys, I hope you have enjoyed. Please feel free to like, subscribe, share or watch some of my other videos. Thank you very much for watching and goodbye. A big thank you to Antti Hannanen, Chris Gadsby, Connor B, John Plomin, Jordan Whitehead, Paul Mallia, Roman from London, The Legacy and Worthless Pieces, as well as a huge thank you to Let's Talk Hockey for helping support this video via Patreon. If you too want to help support the channel a little bit further and get a shout out at the end of every future video, make sure you head over to patreon.com/oddmanrush and become a patron today.